First, let's start with Kelly Stafford.
Oh, you gotta give him that hawk too and spit on that thing. You get me?
If you didn't hear about this, well, you need to spend less time working or studying or doing whatever it is you're doing, and you need to spend more time on TikTok. Spend more time in front of that phone, all right? You're not getting enough screen time if you haven't heard of this yet. But Kelly Stafford, wife of Los Angeles Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford, she's making headlines this week for saying this on Kelly Bristow's podcast.
Hated him. I loved him. I dated the backup to piss him off, which worked.
Oh, yes.
He was like,
that'll do it.
He was the bad boy, too. Like, Matthew's so sweet and Southern gentleman and all that stuff. And the backup was the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Ooh, and it upset him. So they lived in the same dorm because athletes lived in the same dorm, and he would see my car there. And so at one point, he like waited and followed me out and got in my car and wouldn't get out. And he was like,
this is so hot.
I was like, this is amazing. It's working.
Yeah.
I was get out of my car and he was like, he's not right for you. And I was like, what? You can't tell me that.
Now, this is getting a lot of attention, but she actually said the same story 2 years ago.
Some of my podcast is our story because it's a really funny fucking story because we were all over the place. I dated the backup to piss him off. Like, that was the type of situation we were in.
You dirty dog!
Listen, he deserved it, okay? He deserved it.
That backup is crazy. What is he doing?
You know what? He was like the bad boy. He Matthew's like this genuine soul, and then it was the bad boy. So he
but he's the backup. You're like, if I'm Matthew, I'm sending the offensive line after him. Like, this guy off the team. Get him out of here.
I don't think he saw the field after that.
Yeah.
But in the end, I always tell him we ended up together. And we had to go through all of it.
This time around, the video seems to have gotten like 10,000 views, but the one on Barstool from 2 years ago actually got 1 million views. So it's a little confusing about why this time is being talked about so much and last time it really wasn't. But let's start with that, actually. So 2 years ago, you were on a podcast and somehow this whole thing went under the radar and nobody really talked about it. No one really commented on the fact that you hooked up with the backup quarterback to make Matt jealous. So you kind of got away with it. Then 2 years later, you decide to tell the story again, this time with the added detail that Matt waited outside of the backup QB's dorm, followed you into your car, and then wouldn't get out of your car when you told him to. If that part of the story is true, and you said, Matt, get out of my car, and he said no, that is not the right answer. If you are in a woman's car, and she says, get out of my car, you get the fuck out of her car. You don't sit in there and tell her, hey, no, you should be with me, like, we're supposed to be together. That is super fucking creepy, man. But, so, presumably the backup quarterback that Kelly's referring to is Joe Cox. He's currently a tight ends coach for Ole Miss. And you know what else Joe Cox is? He's a husband. Here's a picture of Joe and Matt on Joe's wedding day in 2016. He's a father. Here's a picture that the Daily Mail decided to post, thanks to Kelly Stafford. And now in the age of technology, Joe Cox's daughters are gonna have to see this on the internet someday. They're gonna see on the internet that, like, okay, well, in college, dad was hooking up with Matthew Stafford's future wife. Which isn't that big of a deal, but you know how relentless kids can be, like, on the playground and at school. And, well, thanks for giving, this great gift to Joe Cox's kids. Way to go, Kelly. In fact, Kelly Stafford did issue an apology to presumably Joe Cox, because once again, I'm assuming that's who we're talking about here. But speaking of the whole kids angle of this, Kelly, your daughters are going to grow up with this as the example of how you and dad got together. Like, what's the lesson here? Hey, girls, if the boy you like doesn't like you back or isn't showing enough interest in you, here's what you do. Find his bad boy friend, hook up with that guy, because I'm sure that's always going to end well, and try to make him jealous. That's the way to go about getting into a healthy relationship. Oh, and if the guy is refusing to get out of your car, that means it's working. That means, oh, honey.
And so at one point, he like waited and followed me out and got in my car and wouldn't get out. And he was like,
this is so hot.
I was like, this is amazing. It's working. Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If you have like a happy marriage and everything, good for you. I'm happy for you guys. But this love story has terrible morals. Playing games isn't exactly the healthy way to start a relationship. And if this was the only time that you slipped up and said something that could be embarrassing to Matt, like that'd be one thing if it's an isolated incident. You know, people do let things slip sometimes. Hell, Tom Holland does it to Marvel all the time.
Yeah, well, now you know. Now you know. Sorry, Marvel. Whoops.
But this is pretty far from the first time you've said something to embarrass Matt. Like when Matt was playing for the Lions and Kelly came out and said that she was sick of living in a dictatorship in Michigan because of all the restrictions going on due to COVID.
Kelly Stafford said she's, quote, over living in a dictatorship that we call Michigan in a series of videos. Stafford then apologized for her criticism of Governor Whitmer's pandemic order.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kelly, that you have to stay inside just like the rest of us. And I'm sorry that you think that makes this a dictatorship. There was a global fucking pandemic going on that's killed over 7 million people to date. Or how about last year when Kelly revealed that Matt can't relate to his own teammates. She said, Matt said it's so different and hard to get to know these guys. He had a book printed out. He had the equipment guy get a book printed of all their faces and all their names because he's like, I need to know their names. We need to talk. So I'm going to find their names and I'm going to say, hey, so-and-so, how was your weekend? Yeah, great. Because Matt's teammates needed to know that that's what he's up to and that's what he's doing. And that's why he's memorized. That's how he knows who they are, because he studied in a book. And look, my question is this, Kelly. It's a pretty simple question. When are you going to just shut the fuck up? How many more times do you need to embarrass your husband before you learn to just shut the fuck up? What is all this for? Is this just for clicks on your shitty podcast? Nobody would know who the fuck you are or listen to that thing if it wasn't for Matthew Stafford. That's just a cold reality. Nobody would care about your podcast if it wasn't for Matt Stafford. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're hot, so your YouTube channel would probably do better than my YouTube channel. Still, the most interesting thing about you is your husband. Her podcast is called The Morning After with Kelly Stafford and Hank, which I find funny because like Hank only gets a first name, but Kelly Stafford, you have to have Stafford in there because you know damn well nobody cares about your podcast if you're not a Stafford. Morning After with Kelly and Hank, nobody's downloading that. It has to have Stafford in the title. But the other part that I found really funny when I was looking at this is that the first sentence of her podcast description is, her husband is a Super Bowl winning QB. That's literally the first sentence. It's like, hey, the only reason you guys care is because my husband won a Super Bowl. He's an NFL quarterback. It's not any accomplishment she's made that's making her relevant to this whole thing. It's her husband is he's an NFL quarterback. That's why we care about you. Which, by the way, you actually did do something amazing, Kelly. You're a cancer survivor. That's something that you accomplished. I mean, you should still shut the fuck up, but like, it is amazing that you survived cancer, and I'm happy for you about that. I just don't get why you feel the need to reveal these things. Because here's the thing. If Matt wanted these things out, he has a press conference every week of the NFL season where he can say whatever he wants, as long as it's not about the refs. He can say whatever he wants at his press conference. If he wants to walk into that press conference and go, yeah, so when my wife and I started dating, she hooked up with the backup quarterback, because he wanted that information out there, he could go and say that anytime he wants. If he wanted them to know, hey, so here's what I did to get to know my teammates. I had a book made with all their pictures and names, and I studied it. He could put that out there and say that at his press conference. Up to him. Or he could just do a podcast himself if that's how he wanted to get information out. Like LeBron plays and he has a podcast. Oh, that's James, if you didn't know who I was talking about there. Bottom line, he's the starting quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams. It's kind of a big deal. He doesn't need you putting all this shit out there for him to have to answer and field and deal with. He just doesn't need that. And it's bullshit that all this added anxiety in his life is coming from his wife.